Hello, fellow bootmakers. I'd like to thank Myers for giving me the chance to talk to you about this topic, and I'll start with an apology for pre-recording the narration. I will be in transit in early September and can't be sure what my IT capabilities will be on the 9th. A lot has been written about Sherlock Holmes and music, beginning with a book by that title by Guy Warwick, 1947. He was in the 50s and 60s very involved in the Sherlock Holmes Society of London. More recently, there's a BSI publication referring to my notes, edited by Alex Katz and Karen Wilson. And these books talk about various aspects of, well, as it says on the tin, Sherlock Holmes and music. So the violin, possible identifications of Irene Adler, music that Holmes and Watson might have listened to, and that sort of thing. But what I'm going to talk about is something slightly different. It's music written about Sherlock Holmes rather than referred to in the stories. We begin with a digression. I take you back to a Wednesday evening in January of 1981. I visited the Arthur Conan Doyle collection at the Metropolitan Toronto Reference Library to look for music about Sherlock Holmes, having committed to singing an original song at the Bootmakers' annual dinner at the end of the month. And truly, this was an evening that changed my life because it set me on the path that led to an eventual 60 songs and many ancillary songs. The first book which the curator, Cameron Hollier, brought to me was the Scottish Student's Songbook. I had, of course, never heard of this. It's a kind of a funny book. It was first published in 1891 for the 4 universities in Scotland in order to give the undergraduates a common set of musical pieces that they could perform. Here we have the list of titles within the book. You won't be able to read it because it's pretty small, but the first blue circle is around The Maple Leaf Forever, which is the only Canadian reference in the book. I hadn't realized that that song had been written in 1867. The second circle is around the song Mush Mush, which 40 years later was used as the tune for We Never Mention Aunt Clara. But the reason that Cameron brought the book to my attention is circled in red, the song Sherlock Holmes. The song Sherlock Holmes was written by Claude Rolston, and it's a little bit unclear which edition it first appeared in. For years I've had written down that it was 1894, but I can't prove that it's in edition before 1897, which is the one that is available as a free download. Not very much is known about the author himself, except he obviously was famous enough to have his portrait in the National Portrait Gallery of Scotland. The blurb in the back of the book says he is the author of many songs of great popularity in Edinburgh circles, and also says he's a writer to the Signet, which is a society of solicitors. And here we have the music. So the first line is a piano introduction. The rest of the first page is the music used for the verses. Top of the second page, we have the chorus and the rest of the lyrics. I would indite this ditty to a man who's very cute. Now that's cute in the sense of clever, not saying Sherlock Holmes is attractive. He's the terror of Bill Sloggins and them who'd do a scoot. Now for about 40 years I thought Bill Sloggins was sort of a generic term for a ne'er-do-well, but it turns out there's more to it than that. Bill Sloggins is actually a character in an earlier music hall song. The song is He's All Right When You Know Him, and it was popularized by Charles Coburn, who had been on the music hall stage for a number of years by that point. He's best known for his song The Man Who Broke the Bank at Monte Carlo, which you've probably heard at some point. He performed it around the world in at least 14 languages, performed in Toronto. And there's a video of him doing He's All Right When You Know Him, recorded in 1936 when he was about 83 years old. It's quite remarkable to see. So he's the terror of Bill Sloggins and them who'd do a scoot. He can tell you where you've been to just by looking at your boot, and you know him by the name of Sherlock Holmes. Now we come to the chorus, and this is where it goes downhill a bit. With his lips hard set and his cigarette, as his fingers through his hair he combs. That's getting a bit cheesy, isn't it? But you can see what he's going to rhyme with combs. It improves then. He's never yet been baffled, and he's sent him to the scaffold by the score, has Sherlock Holmes. The second verse is, I asked him out to dine at my place near Kempton Park. I said the wine was Ruinart. That's a champagne manufacturer. I'd shifted every mark. You lie, it's 3 and 6penny. I know it by the cork, for I found it on the floor, said Sherlock Holmes. I think I altered that one time to say, you lie, it's from Niagara. I know it by the cork. Then we have the third verse. One summer day we started for a race course close to town. He said, against the favourite, we planked our utmost brown. Brown is a slang term for money. I think it comes from the 2-shilling note, which was brown. And before that race was over, why the favourite he broke down. That physic's done the trick, said Sherlock Holmes, physic being a term for a drug. He asked a few pals up one night, at poker we did play. The stakes were high, the end drew nigh, this great man was no jay, he was no pushover. 5 aces on the table, with a pistol he did lay. I shall now collect the oof, said Sherlock Holmes. Oof being a Scottish slang for money. You say it is a pity that this splendid man should die. I think the Swiss tail is a plant. I'll give my reason why. There's a lady in the question, so he's gone and done a guy. But he'll turn up again, will Sherlock Holmes. So here we have Claude Ralston predicting sometime between 1894 and 1897 that Sherlock Holmes would return from the Reichenbach. The next example is The Ghost of Sherlock Holmes by Richard Morton with music by H.C. Barrie, who was a prominent music hall performer who sang with Marie Lloyd. It was published in 1894, and I've seen this performed by Roger Johnson at a music hall evening of the Sherlock Holmes Society of London. And here is Roger performing the song at the old Dr. Butler's Head pub in the city, just across the road from the Bank of England. I also performed at that music hall night in 2006 and sang 3 of my songs. And here we have the music for the song. So the first page is a frantic piano introduction setting the mood. The first 2 bars at the top of page 2 are repeated. We call that vamp till ready to allow the accompanist to fill in if necessary if the soloist isn't ready. Then we have the verses after that. This is what's called the lead sheet. So it has the first verse with the melody and then the subsequent verses. So this is what a soloist would use so they don't have to turn pages. Don't start, and pray don't leave your seats. There's no cause for alarm. Though I've arrived from warmer spheres, I mean you all no harm. I am a ghost, a real ghost too, that nightly earthward roams. In fact, I am the spectre of Detective Sherlock Holmes. Detective Sherlock Holmes. And here's the chorus. Sherlock, Sherlock, you can hear the people cry. That's the ghost of Sherlock Holmes as I go creeping by. Sinners shake and tremble where'er this hoagie roams. And people shout, he's found us out. It's the ghost of Sherlock Holmes. The next music hall song is Sherlock Holmes D.T., with D.T. standing for detective. It was popularized by Charles Bignell, who was known as the King of Fun and apparently was an influencer of the eventual writers of Monty Python. published 1901, and it was during the run of the Gillette play. There's a reference to that you'll see in a moment. This I got through the Arthur Conan Doyle collection, where it's digitized and available on the website. Here we have another frantic introduction on the first page there. Our old friend Vamp Till Ready, the first bar, and then the verses. And here's the lead sheet for this one. In this case, the chorus is different each time, but I'll just be giving you the first verse and chorus. I am a man of great renown. My power of deduction is great. I've got an eye like a hawk, you know. I beg you allow me to state. All sorts of secrets and all sorts of crimes I fathom with faintest of clues. And when once I have got a grip on the case, the culprit I never will lose. I'm Sherlock Holmes, the man of mystery. I'm Sherlock Holmes, the marvelous, wonderful D. Supposed to be dead, to life I've come. I nightly appear at the Lyceum. You bet I am going to make things hum, for I'm Sherlock Holmes, D.T. I'm Sherlock Holmes. And now we have something a little bit different, to not quote Monty Python, both in terms of the style and the fact that it's not to original music as the three previous examples have been. This appeared as The Empty House was being published in Strand magazine, and it is written by P.G. Wodehouse, a very young P.G. Wodehouse, early 20s, still working in a bank, not writing full-time yet, but contributing to Punch magazine, Titbits, and other of these weekly and monthly journals. And he set it to the tune of Archie's song from a play called The Toreador, which I don't think is very well known these days, but it actually ran for 675 performances in the early 1900s. It's a very complex rhyme scheme, and he's done quite a job to fit it all in. Oh, Sherlock Holmes lay hidden more than half a dozen years. He left his loving London in a whirl of doubts and fears. For we thought a wicked party of the name of Moriarty had dispatched him in a manner fit to freeze one. They grappled on a cliff top, on a ledge 6 inches wide. We deemed his chances flimsy when he vanished o'er the side. But the very latest news is that he merely got some bruises. If there's a man who's hard to kill, why he's one. Oh, Sherlock, Sherlock, he's in town again. The prince of perspicacity, that monument of brain. It seems he wasn't hurt at all by tumbling down the waterfall. That sort of thing is fun to Sherlock. Now I'm trying to find the origin of this expression, the prince of perspicacity. I'm not even sure I can say it right. I thought I remember it coming from T.S. Eliot, but I hadn't been able to verify that. So if someone can clarify, I would be very pleased to hear it. Here we have another one that was written to what was at the time a familiar tune, Sherlock Holmes by A.H. Hamilton. It was published in Titbits magazine 1904, and it's available in a book called Sherlock Holmes Edwardian Parodies and Pastiches, which you can get electronically for, I think, about $8 or something. So it's set to a traditional Irish jig called The Top of the Cork Road, and unlike most of the other songs of this era, it does not appear to be satirical. It's a glowing report of Holmes' abilities, although the last verse suggests he should settle down and raise a family. We've many detectives of great personality, famous for hunting down crime and rascality, but still there's none of them reach the finality of Sherlock Holmes, who's the king of them all. Here's a health to you, Sherlock, my boy, tales of whose deeds fill our hearts with such joy, smartest clue center, and the best crime preventer, and cutest thief tenter in all the wide world. And for our last example, we go back to a song with original music, but we come across the Atlantic to New York. Oh, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, won't you find my lovin' man? Written by Brady and Watson. unrelated Watson. And it is in ragtime. So if you look at that introduction, it goes da 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 and into the verses. To the home of Sherlock Holmes, lady by the name of Jones came one day, strange to say, said her husband disappeared, victim of a plot, she feared, had the rent when he went. Won't you find him for me, Mr. Holmes? She cried out to him in sobbing tones, you can have most everything I owns, if you will bring him back. Oh, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I'd give 1,000 bones if you can find my lovin' man. This is his description. He isn't tall, and he isn't small, 'bout as big as that. He wears a derby hat. He answers to the name of Jones. Oh, won't you please, please, please hear my tones. Go out and find him, Mr. Holmes. Watson, get the needle quick. Got a job and must be slick. Land this man, if we can. Took a trip to Scotland Yards. Found her husband playing cards. Quite content. Rent had went. Sherlock said we're on the proper trail. We'll succeed, I'm sure, if we don't fail. When he said, I'll get you out on bail, Jones said, don't take me home. Now that first line, Watson, get the needle quick, I think this is the first use of that expression, most famous in slightly different form in the Rathbone film, 1939. And so to summarize and put these in context, on the left we have the publications of the Holmes stories, and on the right we have the songs that we've talked about. So Final Problem, 1893, Ghost of Sherlock Holmes appearing a year later. Sherlock Holmes, Claude Ralston, it's unclear when it was written, somewhere between 93 and 97. Hound of the Baskervilles come out in 1901, but Sherlock Holmes DT is not in response to The Hound, but rather to the Gillette play being on stage in London. We have The Return with The Empty House in 1903, and in direct response to that, P.G. Wodehouse back to his native Strand. The last of the stories from The Return is in 2004, along with Hamilton's song Sherlock Holmes. And then after a gap of quite a few years, we have the ragtime, Oh, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. So, in summary, we can see that Sherlock Holmes became a part of popular culture from the very early days and remained part of popular culture even in the gaps between the publication of the short stories. We've seen that there's music about Sherlock Holmes in a variety of genres and media, original tunes and I guess what we would now call filk, set to familiar tunes. And right from the early days, Sherlock Holmes was the butt of jokes. So thank you for your attention. There's my email address if you wish to contact me. And I hope that I have enough internet access to be able to answer some questions afterwards. So thanks and see you all soon.